Okay, we're back again, and we're at the good part, because in the last hour, we just covered 2 learning objectives. So I'm not sure if I'm going too slow for you or too fast, but part of my approach to teaching is to inspire you and to make it real. So memorable, okay? So you take things away that are memorable and not just the textbook memory. So let's have a look at what we're trying to do here. In the last hour, we looked at developing a customer preference map and also re-engineering. In the next hour, or less than that, just 40 minutes, we want to look at number 3 over here. Okay? Strategy implementation, learning objective 3. And the balanced scorecard. Wow, that is your strategy report. Am I right? Yeah. Put your hand up if you have been thinking about this every week in the last 6 weeks. I didn't think so. Okay. All right, but now you will. All right, so that's what we're going to cover now. Now, some of what I'm going over is what we covered in week 1. And why do we want to repeat? Partly because I want you to be very, very clear for your report assessment. Okay? So let's bear with me. Balanced scorecard. You know that the most attention is given to the top and least attention to the bottom. But the attention at the bottom is very critical because that's your human resources. When you go to a restaurant, and many of you have selected restaurants for your project, you want to find out, wow, how important are your waiters to you? How important are your human resources to you? It'll be very interesting. They should be critical. They should be critical. Because the waiters are the touch points for the customer. Am I right? So that I'll be very interested. You should find out. Does the owner really value those waiters? Or are they just, well, if they leave, we can just replace them very easily? Or do we treat them like more than that? Okay? So think about that. That's the attention at the bottom, not the financial at the top. Okay? So I'll give you a story. I was in a restaurant, not this weekend, the last weekend. We go into this coffee restaurant. I'm not going to tell you which restaurant it is. And I asked for egg on toast. And the person that was preparing the toast, he just used his bare hands. And so he grabbed all the toast and like this, and then put it down. And I'm thinking, really? Do I really want to eat that? I worry. I worry when I see too much. Too much information was not a good thing on that day for me. Okay, so we did explain about the balanced scorecard. It is about focusing. It is about setting accountability. It is about just bringing clarity to what are we doing? What are we doing here? Actually, you could do, any of you who cannot find a company, you could do the balanced scorecard on Monash Business School if you want to. Okay? And you come and interview me. But I'll give you a hard time if you do that. All right. So, do companies use scorecard systems? Yes, they do. What do they use them for? For a whole range of reasons that are in your handouts. What are the benefits? Able to measure things. If you can measure something, it makes it visible. And when it becomes visible, it's likely you can manage it better. That's all. That's all. Okay, so in the future, did you know AI technology, in the future, we can actually put a little camera at the top of this lecture theatre and it can scan you. Okay, scanning like this. And it can determine, student number 45 was paying attention for 50% of the time. Student number 67 fell asleep halfway through the lecture. That's where technology is going. That's measurement. That's measuring things, okay? So be careful if you want to choose a university that has this IT in place. Maybe that's the future. Okay, measurement. And I used to say to my students, measurement, all right? So now I want to give you an example of chipset with the scorecard. And I briefly showed you this in week 1. And this is in page 501 of edition 14, but you all have edition 16, I believe. So it may be a different page, but the same table is there. So what you have with a full scorecard, you have strategic objectives, and you have measures and initiatives, and you have target and actual performance. But what is important is, what are you measuring? That is the hardest part that organisations grapple with. What do we measure? How do we measure something? What I tell to a lot of businesses, if I was to go and interview in Geo or go anywhere around here, businesses, and they were to say to me, what should we start measuring? You know one thing? You know the one thing you need to tell them. There's only one thing. Do you know what that is? Hey, class. Hello. This is practical here. All right? I want you to be consultants from now on. Okay? Have that mind of a consultant. I've been able to help businesses. You are no longer students. You are consultants. Okay? That mindset. Okay? No employer that I know of hire a student from any university. They want to hire students that are, in their mind, ready to work. Okay? Not a student in the mind. So how do you be a different? How do you change your mindset? Here's the first example. I would go to any of the restaurants if they said to me, you're doing this scorecard, we can't measure anything, we don't have a system. My colleague teaches ERP, it costs lots of money for a system, why do we need to have a system? I notice in some of the restaurants that when you do an order, they spend half an hour trying to type it into the system. And I say, why can't you make my order? Why do you spend so long to put it into the system? Anyway, if someone asks me, what do I measure, Neil? What do I start measuring? The last thing I tell them is to get an information system. The first thing I'll tell them is, ask a simple question to every customer that comes in. Just, why did you come to this restaurant? Find out why. Why are they coming to the restaurant? And after they finish their meal, you get a rating from them. Find out, will they come again? First question. Second question, what is the likelihood they would recommend our restaurant to someone else? You start measuring that. That is critical. Those 3 things, that's all. No computer system is needed. A computer system is just going to confuse everyone. Every business I have seen since I've been here in 6 months around this area should be doing that. Any small business should be asking those questions of its customers. So if you're asked as part of your project, can you give some advice? Then this is what you would tell them. Are we all clear? You're consultants now. Okay, so there's chipset. I'm going to talk about measurement shortly. But what I've done is broken it down in the PowerPoint, the more detail. What are the measures? Market share, number of new customers, customer satisfaction ratings. This is all stylized and generic. Yield, order delivery time, processes. I'm just looking at this thing here. Just focusing on measurement at the moment. percentage of workers empowered, employee satisfaction, percentage of workers trained. Right? These are all measures. I'll come back to this shortly. But systems thinking is the next area. I introduced that in week 1. And what was this? Do you remember this? Do you remember the shower? Remember? When I was a kid, we have a shower, you had hot and cold water. And the golden rule is never ever get in the shower before you find out what the temperature is. But what did we mean by a system? There was a detection of the temperature. There was a detection compared with the standard. That was the second step. Then the third step was an action. So action, detection, and comparison. Action, detection, comparison. All right? That's a system. Okay, in week 1, I said, what is the big difference between very successful businesses and failures? What's the big difference in the systems? The systems in successful businesses go fast or slow? Hands up for fast. Hands up for slow. Okay, it's fast, all right? In successful businesses, they're testing, getting feedback, comparing, making action every hour. Okay, not waiting every month for the accounting cycle. Not waiting for the budget cycle every month. They're testing, getting feedback every hour of the day. And so then they're able to adapt faster. Adaptation is very, very critical. Okay, so how many of you know this person? You don't know? Steve Jobs? I want you to read this. Let's read this together because this is your life. Creativity is just connecting things. When you ask creative people how they did something, they feel very little guilty because they didn't really do it. They just saw something. It seemed obvious to them after a while. Wow. All right? You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. I want you to think about that because the system is not just an organisation. You are all in a system or multiple systems. Do you know which one you're in? Do you know where you are? Are you connecting the dots? Okay? This is a system of Philips. I had the chance to do consulting and write a case study on Philips. And they introduced a balanced scorecard. Really? They really did that? Yes, they did. And not just in chapter 12. Companies really do this stuff. Anyway, so they asked all their Asian operations, you must do a scorecard. In less than 2 years later, they stopped it. It failed. And what were the reasons? There was no clear link to strategy. There was information overload. In other words, I'm measuring too many things. And unreliable and untimely information. In other words, some things I'm measuring every month, some things I'm measuring every day, some things I'm measuring every 6 months. So at any point in time, not all measures were up to date. And then that created confusion. And so then they stopped it. So while this lecture is to tell you about the beauty of the balanced scorecard and how we love the balanced scorecard, companies have tried it and they have failed. So what do you do as a consultant? Start simple. Just start simple. You can never go wrong in advising a client to just measure one new thing. Measure one new thing. Not a scorecard, just measure one new thing. That's my advice to a lot of people that ask me. All right? A scorecard is not always the answer. So what do we got here? This is a This is your project. This is your strategy map exercise, right? You're going to do a strategy map of the small business. Now remember, it doesn't have to be as complex as this. Let me repeat. The reason why you're doing a project is to prepare you for working with clients, to prepare you for working with unusual situations, prepare you for working with rejection, okay? When people say, go away, we don't want you to interview us. That happens, all right? This, you will get out of this, but you'll get so much more than what you present in week 10, week 11. Okay, so now we're going to do a systems exercise. I want you to tell me, I want you to connect the dots on these. What would go first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth? And this can be a restaurant. This could be as simple as a strategy map you do for your project. That's if your company is measuring all of these things. So now, what would go first? Well, let me help you. The last part is shareholder value. That's the top. But what's at the bottom? What goes first? Can I have some suggestions, please? Where do we start? Do we start with employees or the customers? I'm glad we got that right. Okay. All right. Employees always come first. Okay. People say customer first. No. Employees come first because it's the employees that are touching the customers. They're the customer touch points, especially in service industries. Okay. So where do we start? So which one is first? Employee satisfaction, added value, or selection and staffing? Okay, selection and staffing. And then what comes after that? Hands up for added value. Hands up for satisfaction. You're both right. Okay, so what comes after? Why did I say you're both right? It depends. It depends on which business you're in. And it depends on what your employees think. Because at the end of the day, you as a boss should not be dictating which comes first. This should be something you have a discussion with your employees, because they're the ones that will be following that vision. They're the ones that will be following that. Remember those 3 different strategies in the coffee shop? You want the employees to be all agree. And that's not going to happen with the boss saying, this is what you have to do, otherwise you're fired. You're going to have unhappy employees, and that's going to spill over into the customer experience, and the restaurant's not going to be a happy place to come to. Okay, so employee participation, you're both right. Added value can come first, satisfaction can come first. Then what comes next? Customer behaviour or customer satisfaction? Hands up for behaviour. Hands up for satisfaction. Okay, I could ask the same thing again. I forget if there's a correct answer, but we can have selection, staffing, employee satisfaction, employee added value, customer satisfaction, customer buying behaviour, sustained profitability. So in some ways, buying behaviour is them coming back to buy a second time, then a third time, then a fourth time. All right. And shareholder value. So that's an example of there's a strategy map. So what is the new thing? So in week 1, I introduced that to you. But what I want to spend a little bit of time today is about measurement. Measurement. Okay? We want to spend time with measurement. And measurement is the hardest thing that a lot of companies get a lot of angst over. All right, here is measurement here. Here's a measurement of a factory that manages a supply chain. So this comes directly from the factory that I have visited in the past. So which factory was it? Hard question, I've shown you too many. All right, the factory was PQI. They make the USB Doogles, not the video PQI, but the PQI from Taiwan. Okay, they make the good USBs. The one I showed you in the video, some of them are good, lots of them are bad. But it doesn't matter, they're making money. Okay, this one here, this is PQI. This is the measurement system of scorecard system for their suppliers. And you've got A, B, and C. Wow. And what are they measuring of their suppliers? Costing, delivery, management, quality, relationship, resourcefulness. They're measuring lots of things about their suppliers. So at the end of the day, when you're measuring something, you measure for a particular decision. What is the decision here? The decision is how much do we order from the supplier and do we continue with the supplier? If we measure customer satisfaction, why are we measuring that? Maybe to give feedback onto do we continue with an employee if there's a complaint about their attitude. See, you measure something to help make a better decision. If there's no decision to be made, you don't need to measure. There's a second reason why you may measure, and that is to affect the decision inside someone's mind. Do you understand? Let me repeat. We're talking about measurement here. There's only one reason why you may measure something. You measure it to inform a decision. Okay? So an economic decision is, do we cut a supplier? Do we order more from a supplier? Okay? An economic decision is, do we employ more people or do we deploy people? That's an economic decision. But there's a psychological decision that measurement informs. And that affects the people that are under that measurement. So for example, Monash University is measuring your attendance, right? So what decision does Monash make? It doesn't make many decisions at all with regards to that measure. But that forces you to make a decision about should I attend or not. You with me? Because you know that we are measuring it. So that's not an economic decision, that is a psychological decision that measurement helps to reinforce. Okay? Now you attend anyway, not because of the measure, but knowing the measure's there, then you feel that it's fair because you know that other people will come too. You see? So that's informing the psychology of the mind. That's the culture. All right? So at the end of the day, measures help decisions, whether they're economic or psychological. That's all. If you don't have anything to manipulate in the psychology or the economic, then there's no need to measure anything. And everyone can be happy and do what they want. Okay, so let me give an example of measurement. Measurement. Ione, you know Ione, but we've got to show another part. I think this is working. Oh, it's working, yes. Okay, so Ione, they do a lot of measuring. And this is the first time I visited them. The video I showed you earlier was the second time. But this time, we have to go in because of the dust, and they've got to blow all the dust off us before we go into the clean room. Okay, dust-free. What I'm going to show you is an assembly line where they are measuring the defects at the end of the assembly line. And this is one of the top companies in Shenzhen that are making car DVRs, headphones. this day that I'm there, they're making the items. There's the DVR assembly line here. A car DVR, the thing you put in the window so it actually films the car and the road in front of you. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so that's what they're making here. So they're the electronic components that go into the item. Now down the end, they are measuring how many items have been rejected and how many have been passed. And so that's measurement. That's what we mean by measurement. So every factory does measuring. It doesn't mean that a service industry like a restaurant should not be doing measuring. And so when we get to the end of the assembly line, you'll actually see that we're actually measuring how many of these have been rejected for the production run. So let's go through to the end and see what they've been measuring. Let's have a look. Let's go through here. Remember, here we go. All right, so how many of you, who knows Chinese? 一点点讲國語啊，識講少少廣東話啊，識講。Okay, so what you've got here are the different times of the production, and then if there was any problem or defect, then that was rated next to each of those 7 problems. See the 7 problems? So that's measurement. When we say measurement, it's when we are systematically recording something. Accounting is not the only measurement in an organisation. Budgets are not the only measures in an organisation. Okay? This is measurement too. And so on that day they said, oh, we get about 10% reject. And so I said to the manager, my advice was, you need to think about rewarding the staff with a bonus if they can get that down to 5% reject. Because 10% reject is not sustainable in a factory like this. That means you're throwing away 10% of all the materials and labour and resources used to make those 10% of products. Okay? So you wouldn't know that if you weren't doing the measuring. And then the measures here tell you what's wrong with each of those 7 items. I'll get my Chinese assistant to write that down in English in the future, but that's not the point. I just want to show you every company is doing measuring. What is the decision here? The decision is to get feedback for what is the problem. Is there a problem with the chipset that is coming in from the supplier from outside? If there's a problem in receiving inspection, then, we need to go and talk to that supplier. Hey, you sent us these defective goods. You need to fix this. You need to compensate us. You see, there's an economic decision to be made. All right? So you measure to support decision making in the organisation. Again, here are measures in chipset strategy. I showed you the strategy map earlier, but now we have measures to go with that strategy. Here are measures for that restaurant example I gave you earlier. Okay, remember, selection, staffing, employee satisfaction, employee added value. So here are some measures that we can think about for selection and staffing. So we can start measuring the number of new hires. We can start measuring the average education or the work experience. We can start measuring supervision, support and fairness. Their perceptions of fairness, not the owner's perception of fairness. Okay, all right. Do the employees feel that they are treated fairly in the organisation? Right, because maybe in the past employees left and you asked, oh, why are you leaving? Oh, I don't think you're a fair boss. So if that's the reason why they're leaving, I need to start getting measurement of this earlier so I can take action and change that situation. You with me here? All right, so employment accountability, that's other measures that we could do. So these are different measures that you may want to think about in your strategy map if you're doing a restaurant, if you are doing a restaurant for your project. Measurement. We love measurement. And then customer quality, shopping experience and timeliness, customer satisfaction, buying behaviour. When a customer comes in, hi, how are you? Is this your first time? Oh, welcome, welcome. We've got a little gift for you because it's your first time. And if you say it's your second time, here's another bonus if you come back a third time. So you want to know if customers are coming in, is it their first time? Is it their second? If it's the second time, it means they had a good experience on the first time. You need to know that. Because if your restaurant is to be sustainable, you want to increase the percentage of customers coming back a second time and a third time. If they only come once and never come again, there's only a limited number of customers that can never come to you. Wow. Really? It's that simple. Measuring simple things like that. Measuring simple things like that can help any restaurant. And then we know you had we did this in week 1, right? Just to remind you, we can make fantastic coffee. Nice. Or great customer experience. Or improve margins by being an efficient business. We know that, okay? So there are different ways, and you know that. But what I'm going to introduce to you now is to think about these measures. Here are measures that need to be, not much room, is there? It's really small like that. But here are different measures I want you to think about that will fit with these objectives. And remember, in week 1, I didn't introduce these to you. Deliberately, I didn't want to give you everything in week 1. It was just a very brief introduction. But remember, I think the big takeaway today is to start thinking about measurement. Yeah, measurement. Yes, we love our measures, don't we? All right? And so we can think about all of these measures, and there are 18 of them. And so we can go through operating profit, sales, expenses. They look like accounting or top financial preference, financial perspective measures in Balanced Scorecard. But if you look at past used by waste, percentage of materials ordered online, service quality index, you'll notice that that refers to other perspectives in the scorecard. Okay, so I want you to be able to think about which of these match with the particular objectives. Now, the answers are in your PowerPoint slide, but if you were to go through this exercise before looking at the answer, that would be good preparation for your project and possibly the exam. Okay? Okay, so let's do a summary here. Let's bring it all together. Okay. First of all, thank you for allowing me to give you week 6. Okay, thank you for staying here. All right. So when you go out of here, what are your action points? Here are your key action points. Okay? Right? Number 1, companies, if you compare 10 companies and you go and talk to all 10, they may tell you 10 different strategies. They've got their own ideas, right? In chapter 12 is introducing you to, there's all these different strategies, but generally there are these 2 generic ones and there's a third one. Differentiation, cost leadership, and a focusing strategy. All right. The second thing you need to take away. Re-engineering is not just for engineers. You need to understand what type of re-engineering can be done in a particular industry that you are consulting in. So if you're consulting to suppliers in China, then it's obvious you've got to think about machines, you've got to think about robots, okay? But if you're thinking about a restaurant, then you need to think about the ordering system. You need to think about how the tables are organised. You need to think about the payment system. You need to think about different things that can be best organised, you see. So when we talk about re-engineering, we're talking about how do we change the process. Let me repeat. How do we change the process? To save time, to save costs. How do we change the process? And number three, the third thing to take away today is the balanced scorecard. I introduced it to you in week 1, but the big takeaway today was to start thinking about measuring things. Why do we measure? We measure so we can make better decisions, better economic decisions, or better psychological decisions, okay, when you're trying to influence people. Okay. On Thursday, when we see each other, I'm going to go through Learning Objective 4, and that's definitely examinable. Learning Objective 4 is going to be a bit more computational. I will try and think about how to make it exciting. I think I can. I can try. Okay. So, and Learning Objective 5 and 6, we'll cover 5, but Learning Objective 6 will not be covered in this unit or the exam. So class, my style is different. It's different from Mason. Okay, Mason is a very good teacher. I'm not saying I'm a good teacher, but I focus on other things in the teaching process, and I just hope you just enjoy our time together for the next 4 weeks. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. On time too.